From Provo, Utah, this is the Ultimate Final Fantasy Podcast with your hosts, Joseph DeGolier and Caleb Schweitz. This is Ultima Final Fantasy. Welcome to another episode of Ultima Final Fantasy, the ultimate, we think, Final Fantasy podcast. I am Joe.
And I'm Caleb.
And we had, this week, on Wednesday, we sat down via Skype with Aniero Grigori of Limit Break Radio. And so we're actually going to play that interview in two parts. Part 1 is going to be on this episode. Part 2 will be on next week's episode. We didn't expect it to be a 3-hour interview, but it turned into one glorious, in-depth 3-hour interview with the main man of Limit Break Radio.
Yeah, it's pretty great. We didn't even really have to do anything. Guy followed exactly what we were going to ask him without even knowing, and it was a good time. Yeah. So,
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. So you can find that episode, or this episode, I suppose, and everything else we've released on youtube.com/Ultima Final Fantasy. Follow us on Twitter at UFF Podcast, like our page on Facebook, facebook.com/Ultima Final Fantasy. Throw us a few bucks on Patreon if you'd like. We recently got a goal for the new website. We're getting that migrated over now, and it might be down for this episode, actually. We're not sure how long it's going to take.
It could be down. I think it's going to go down on Sunday or Monday, and we'll try to pick it up as soon as we can. It's going to be construction zone for a little while.
Yeah, until we get everything worked out. So there's that, and follow me on Twitch. I've been streaming 13. Been doing some off-cam grinding, but most of it's been on, online with Twitch, and that's twitch.tv/Ultima Final Fantasy. And then you can find this and more at ultimafinalfantasy.com.
Yes. Well, you can find it, assuming the website's not down. If you want to jump on the forums, though, the forum URL for now is ultimafinalfantasy.boards.net.
Right.
However, that forum is going to go the way of the dinosaurs in the next couple months, but we're still using that for now.
Right, so that'll be safe until the site's up.
And if you want to join us on Final Fantasy 14, we're going to be starting that soon. Apparently, we're going on Brynhildr. I had a little issue with my Final Fantasy 14 game yesterday where I had bought a used copy, stupidly. Yeah. And turns out the registration code was already in use and you couldn't use it again. So I wasted $20, I don't know how many months ago, when I got the PS4 version of Final Fantasy XIV. So I'm going to figure out what I'm going to play it on. I think I said I was going to play it on PC, but I think I've changed my mind since then. I think I'm going to go with PS4.
Yeah?
Yeah, just for the fact that I bought a PS4 and I kind of want a reason to play on it.
Yeah, I feel you.
Is that a weird want?
Not really, although it is a weird want that you feel the need to have a physical copy of a downloadable game for PS4. And this is your punishment for wanting that. You could have just bought the damn thing on the PlayStation Store, but I don't know. I wasn't even thinking of that, though, when you bought it. I was like, oh, cool. I didn't even think registration code. Why would you buy a used copy? I was like, well, why would they even sell it? But
well, I'm pretty mad. I'm pretty mad as fuck to the people who sold it to me, but I think it's too late for returns.
Yeah, it's probably far too late now.
Yeah.
So
where are you in FF13?
Right now, I am grinding it out. I'm still working towards that platinum trophy.
Oh yeah.
And I've just been killing Adamant Tortoise and the Adamantoise hunt number 63. I get a gold ingot out of that every time. And I just jump on the chocobo, ride around, pick up a few treasures on the way, go take on the hunt. On the way back, I'll kill one of the even bigger guys to try to get one of the trap drops, which I've been having way better luck with on the advanced Adamant Tortoise versus the Adamantoise. And they also give you 200,000 experience, so I'm about to max out everyone's Crystallarium, too. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and you, what about you?
I am done.
Yeah?
Done. Hey, are we going to record the FF13 episode next Saturday or the Saturday after?
I'm not sure. Whichever one works better for you.
Let's go with next Saturday.
All right.
Yeah, so it's going to be recorded a week earlier than it'll actually be put out.
All right, that's fair enough.
So if you want to join us, we'll be on twitch.tv next Saturday.
Yeah, forever and ever.
Yeah, it's going to be a long review episode, as most of our reviews are. However, if you want to ask a question or leave your short review, there are places to do that in our forum, ultimatefinalfantasy.boards.net. Schweiss, let's get to the news.
All right, let's do it.
News.
All right, so first up in news, the new Final Fantasy Adventure game apparently is for PlayStation Vita. According to Sony TGS 2015's website, it's got it listed as its console. I thought that one was going to be a PS4 game.
I thought it was going to be on mobile.
Really? The one that looks really good? You thought that was going to be a mobile game?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't know. Maybe I just kind of mixed up with all the other mobile
all the other
shit.
jillion games are coming out with.
Yeah, what is this mobile game you're going to speak of right now?
This one is Final Fantasy Adventure 3D Remake that has also been announced for PS Vita and smartphones.
I think it's the same game.
I think so, yeah.
I think someone just gave us two pieces of news.
It is, so it's going to also be on the
So it is going to be on smartphones.
True,
yeah,
but I bet you it's going to look crappier on the
Look
smartphone.
at that.
The trailer they gave for
disorganized
it is much better. Disorganized, fuck you. So,
we got that one already.
Yeah. A lot of repeats. Oh, yeah, this one is a kind of news. So apparently we may see more 3D remakes if Final Fantasy Adventure does well. So, yet another moment where Square's like, if... It's like they have a scientific method to the news they release sometimes. They're like, if this, then this may happen.
Hey, see this little thing? Buy a lot of it, and then this other thing might happen.
Who knows?
Yeah, this other thing that you want and will pay for might happen.
Yeah. I don't know.
Fuck you.
I don't know if we mentioned this last week or not. The Final Fantasy Type 0 Online was announced for PC and smartphone.
Online? What?
Yeah.
No, we didn't talk about this at all.
It's going to have it's going to be like the multiplayer mode in there, but apparently a better and more hack and slash style. I haven't played the multiplayer or Type 0 at all, so I'm not really sure what that means, but if you guys have played it and you enjoy it, I'd be looking forward to that. Looks like it's going to be launching spring 2016 in Japan for smartphone. And is currently being considered.
I'm sick of all these smartphone games.
For
Can
North
we just
America
stop doing news on the
Europe.
smartphone Final Fantasies?
You know, we might have to. We might just have to. So, FF14 has a new patch. Well, the 14 patch 3.1 is going to launch this November, and there's going to be new raids and more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so more 24-player raids, similar to the Crystal Tower series, is going to be available in 3.1. And the role requirements are going to be the same as those in World of Darkness, which means, 1 tank, 2 healers, and 5 DPS, as we all know, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, more
We
dungeons.
all
That's
know what that means.
That's kind of what 14 and MMOs are all about, is the dungeon raids with friends. And apparently there's a RTS minigame, Lord of Verminion, and there's some details on that. I honestly have no idea what this is. It's apparently some sort of minigame, obviously, within 14. And you get to use your own minions for battle. You can summon them multiple times. It's like some sort of arena-looking thing.
Huh.
I don't know. This probably means a lot
That
more
looks interesting.
to everyone who plays 14.
Well, we'll be playing 14 in just a little bit here.
It's true.
Yeah.
In just a little bit.
In fact, just keep a look on our Twitter, and we'll let you know when we're on for the first time, at least.
Yeah, it'll tweet when we start streaming it. So, and obviously, if I don't forget to change the game from 13 to 14, we'll be fine. And, there's some more details on Kingdom Hearts 2.8, blah, blah, blah. PS5. Yet another World of Final Fantasy thing. And then the most important news.
Okay, so we're finally to the important stuff.
Yeah, the actual news, the meaty goodness of Final Fantasy 15. So earlier we watched the new Chocobo trailer and the fishing minigame trailer. What did you think about that?
I thought the Chocobo didn't look that much faster than just walking around in the game. However, of course, being safe from the creatures is, of course, always a good thing when you're on a Chocobo.
Really? I thought he was way faster.
He's faster, but it didn't seem like it was... It didn't seem like overworld mappy with the Chocobo that we're used to, you know? It seemed more like the FF12 kind of Chocobo, where it's in the same environment and it's 50% faster.
Yeah.
And with that, it doesn't seem as impressive to me.
Yeah, the 13 one is really fucking slow, too. And I hate their dreadlocks. God damn it. Or not dreads, whatever it is, like the Obi-Wan braid thing. That
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Looks so dumb. So there's new details on Luna, Freya, Yuna, blah, 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 how many ever names they want to combine into one, and the black-haired woman. So this one, I don't know, the 15 is seeming a lot more along the veins of 12 with the politics of it all. And apparently King Regis fought in his youth beside Cid and General Kor.
Is it core or is it sore? Does it hurt?
I don't know. But apparently there's a new black-haired woman that we saw in the trailer, and her name is Gentiana. And
wow.
She plays an important role.
You know how much that name looks like genitalia from this far away?
Quite.
Gentiana.
Quite is the answer to that. So, and this is kind of interesting off news. They released a perfume, a Noctis perfume.
I don't
Final
believe
Fantasy
it. This
15.
is from Kotaku. Eau de toilette?
Yeah,
Noctis.
Apparently it smells kind of citrusy, and I guess Noctis smells like lemon and lime. I don't know how to take that. It's just, it is Kotaku. You're right. Maybe we shouldn't even talk about it, but I don't know.
Well, thank you, Shinru, for giving us some news this week.
Shinru and Sinner something.
Sinner something.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Well, it's like 0913, but I think that's what it is. I'm not 100% sure. If they come up with fuck off names with a ton of numbers in them, I can't be helped. It's going to be messed up.
Okay. So, guys, it's now time for our interview with Aniero, part 1. This part of the interview is about the final, like the Limit Break Radio of yesteryear.
Yeah, the FF11 days.
Yeah, the FF11 days, starting in 2006 and ending, I think, in around 2009 or 10 or something around there.
Yeah, something like that. We'll find out soon.
Anyway, he actually really opened up to us, and he went really in depth with the Final Fantasy 11 days, and especially what happened in between Final Fantasy 11 and Final Fantasy 14, A Realm Reborn.
Correct.
And what happened with his podcast. If you guys don't know about Limit Break Radio, I don't know. If you listen to our show, I don't know how you don't know about Limit Break Radio.
Yeah.
Because they famously, of course, won our own contest.
Yeah.
With our own name submitted to our own voters who decided to vote for Limit Break Radio.
Well,
actually, it was probably
think it was
theirs.
Guys. Yeah, it was a lot of people that voted for them. So
You can see the episode. It's the 2014 UFF Podcast Awards, and we had an award out for Best Final Fantasy Podcast. And we, of course, put our own name in there thinking, hey, this is going to be just kind of an award that'll be, haha, we're the best.
Yeah, I was kind of pissed off when I found out you did. I was like, dude, that's douchey. And then we lost anyway.
We're certainly not going to do it for next year.
No.
We will not put our own name there because we'll just assume we're number one.
And then number two is the real.
Number two is going to be the winner. You know, you're good, right?
Yeah, right.
Anyway. We tweeted out to all these people, all these other podcasts that they were nominated, and of course Limit Break Radio's fans, being a large and rambunctious bunch,
really
got onto our website and destroyed us.
Yeah, it was.
We were
quick.
second though. The Final Fantasy Union fan base is just not as strong.
Well, they're either not as strong or they don't like us, which is fine, I guess.
I don't give
either
a
way.
shit. Fuck them. Anyway.
Jeez.
Hey, they got nominated. It's an honor to be nominated.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah,
Right?
It's definitely an honor. I think we should up it this year. We should get cheap awards and send them out.
I think that would be cool.
I think that'd be
I think
really
we should
cool.
do that.
Do like a golden microphone for best host.
Yeah.
We list everybody.
Anyway, when you look in the top 200 video game podcasts in iTunes, Limit Break Radio is always up there, and they've been up there since we started podcasting. And ever since they won kind of our award show, I went back and listened to a bunch of their old stuff when we were going through FF11, and I've been listening. I usually listen to their new episodes as they come out, and they're just a really tight, exciting show.
Right.
And we can't do the same thing that they do because they got 60 hosts.
Yeah, we can't quite do that.
They got 5 people on there. So it's an entirely different show, but certainly when they won that award, we went back and looked at their stuff and was like, okay, what are they doing that we can do better? And I think our show has improved since then, and I can say that at least in part it has to do with us, paying attention to Limit Break Radio. And I just want to thank Aniero for coming on. Guys, enjoy the interview.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. So we're here with Aniero of Limit Break Radio, the man himself, the king of Final Fantasy podcasts.
Yeah, the ass kicker.
Gladly accept that title. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
All right, so we're gonna go through the history of Limit Break Radio, but
why?
Because we're interested. I mean, your podcast beat us at our own stupid contest.
Yeah.
For best Final Fantasy podcast, and I will say that for last year, you guys deserved it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we started in May, so it's,
we didn't have a full year to grow yet. I mean,
fair enough.
We're working our way up right now. I do have to ask you though, and everybody was asking on the forum this: what was your first Final Fantasy?
What was my very first Final Fantasy? That's a fantastic question. So my very I'll start with this answer. My very first RPG was actually Legend of Dragoon for PlayStation 1.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Which was what opened me up to the RPG genre, and from there I kind of became hooked and found Final Fantasy. Like a lot of my friends in middle school were really big fans of both Resident Evil and Final Fantasy VII. And I didn't have a PlayStation. I still had a Nintendo 64 at that time. And when I finally did get a PlayStation, which was a couple of years after, after my peers, I gravitated towards some of the stuff that was going around then, like Metal Gear Solid, and Legend of Dragoon had just come out, and its graphics it was Legend of Dragoon and Chrono Cross. And their graphics and their soundtrack really kind of struck a chord with me. And that was sort of like my way into
RPGs.
Into RPGs, yeah, because before that I would say that I was a huge Zelda fan. Going back to like the NES days, and I played a lot of that on SNES.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of like really my only point of contact. I didn't really find Final Fantasy until after, like, in the PlayStation era. It definitely wasn't a presence for me in the Super Nintendo days. When I was that, yeah, I mean, like I had a healthy interest in all of those games, and I went back and played all of them as I got more interested in it when I became more of an adolescent and an adult. But yeah, that was not something that was in my childhood. My childhood was mostly filled with like Aliens games. I loved Aliens as like a series, and like that was a big foothold. A Terminator too. So it was like that was the stuff that when I was a kid really interested me, and then as I grew up, I kind of found Final Fantasy then. So I think my very first Final Fantasy game that I ever really sat down and tried to play was 9. It was like either 8 or 9. And I wasn't totally into it because Legend of Dragoon was so much more streamlined than Final Fantasy was, because Final Fantasy had some really grind heavy parts, and Legend of Dragoon didn't necessarily have those. It kind of streamlined that a little bit more. So I wasn't as into those games at first, and then I think it was Final Fantasy X that when that came out, and I bought it and I played it front to back, and then I got it, like the Final Fantasy idea like clicked for me, because the thing that kind of turned me away from it was or initially, and this is going to sound kind of funny and a little bit weird, but the thing that kind of turned me away from it initially was that the fact that the games weren't connected at all. Like I couldn't get over the fact that one didn't go into two, and like the story was like completely self-contained. Like for some reason my kid brain couldn't. I was like, then why do I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You don't understand how there could be a sequel and yet it has nothing to do with the other game in the series.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And so because of that, like I couldn't totally get on board with it. And so once I played 10 and I finished 10, and something just clicked for me. So that it was at that point that I started going back in the catalog and like playing games to completion. And there's no Final Fantasy game that I haven't played through and beaten, except for 2. 2 is the only one that I haven't actually played.
Like the real 2 or 4?
Yeah, the real 2.
The real 2. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, you got through it.
No, I use the proper numbering structure.
Oh,
It's
thank
6
God.
is not 3. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really sort of my point of contact was actually Legend of Dragoon, which wasn't even a Square game. So I actually found Square games a little bit later in my life. Yeah.
Nice. Hey, speaking of Legend of Dragoon, did you ever get the button combo thing down?
I did. Yeah, that was
Nice.
actually one of the things that I actually really liked about it was, and that I always kind of like felt was a little bit lacking from other combat systems, because it kept me engaged while the animation was running.
Right.
And I always thought that was super cool. And there were some other games that tried to do it and were okay with it, but nothing on the level of Legend of Dragoon. And really that was like sort of the key to the combat system. If you couldn't like really get the timing down on that, I think players who couldn't get that like really struggled with that game a lot.
Yeah, there was I know I think Prince Albert, which is a hilarious name, by the way.
It is.
One of his moves had like a 22 hit combo thing, and I could hit that thing every time. So I just kicked the final boss's ass in that game. It was awesome.
Oh yeah.
So,
I loved the combo system. It was great. And it actually like it made melee combat like way more useful and feel like more purposeful and like a core part of the gameplay, whereas as opposed to a lot of other RPGs where it's just like attack and here's my animation bot and that's it.
Right.
You know, it's just a stand-in for a dice roll. But with this, like, you know, if you've got the timing down, man, you can pump out serious damage, which I mean, yeah, is necessary for the game, but can also really play to the player's advantage too, which I really liked. So
how did all this lead to FF11?
How did all this lead to FF11? Well, that's a great question. So once I developed an interest in RPGs, and actually, you know, after I played through 10, I started doing this really interesting thing where I would play earlier games in the series with a couple of friends of mine, and there were a
How did that work?
There were a couple of there was one, I think it was Final Fantasy 5 or 6 that had a PS1 re-release where one controller would control half of the party and the other controller would control the other half of the party. And so we had played through maybe half of that game together, and it's sort of like at around that same time we had heard the idea that Square Enix was working on a online Final Fantasy title, and I always wondered like how would that work, and I would always think of like, you know, how there was that 2-player aspect to you know, whatever. I think it was either 5. I think it was 5.
I think they both have it, but
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think they do. I think it may have been just a feature of those versions of that game, but you know, that's what always stuck. I was like, I could never like imagine how it would work. And then, you know, like I didn't really follow the development of it, but I got super into, like, after I got into RPGs, I got super into Ultima Online. And I actually before I got into Ultima Online, there was another, God, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was sort of like a virtual, I think it was called Virtual Worlds. Maybe that's what it was called. But it was like just a chat client that had a world building aspect to it. Just very basic graphic, like you can build walls and like stuff inside of this, essentially what is a chat room. Huh. And it was kind of like an early version of Second Life, where, you know, little communities would sprout up and like people could host, you know, server instances of it, and you could connect to people's servers, and like it was sort of like a really protogenic version of that. And so the idea of like a virtual space, a virtual world, got me really like I was very young when I had found that. I was like still into Pokemon, right? And so like some of the servers were like all Pokemon themed, and like you could write the rules in the game so that you could have like a mini game inside of their virtual world. It was kind of a cool little thing that you could do. And so some of these had like kind of like Pokemon themed rules, and it was really pretty creative and cool. And so that like that to give you an idea, that's how young I was. I was like, it was like first generation of Pokemon too. So like, I mean, that'll date me too. I'm 30 years old, by the way. So like I would have been all of like 11 or 12. And I was interested in this like virtual, like I was hanging out in basically what was an early version of Second Life. Like, I don't know what my parents were doing to supervise me at that point, but they were not probably much, doing their due diligence there. But anyway, so I that led to me getting really interested and then involved in Ultima Online. A couple of my friends at school were playing it, and because I was like interested in virtual worlds and like online chat rooms, I was like, oh, that's kind of like it was like this other thing, but it's an actual game. And so I got really involved with that. And when I got really involved with it, I got super involved with my guild, which was kind of like a role playing guild. And while hanging out with them, I would occasionally like load up a Shoutcast streaming server and stream like DJ sessions to them, like for their own private, like in guild DJ session. And so like, I think that was sort of the genesis for the whole idea that you could, that you could like narrowcast or broadcast to a very specific subset of people and be able to kind of cultivate a small audience there. And then
this was pre-podcast though.
Yeah, this was definitely pre-podcast. Although there was also this cool thing that I don't want to give EA any credit for this, because EA later bought out the company that used to run Ultima Online, and I'm blanking on what the company name is. Fuck. I would really love to be able to give them proper credit. But in the early days of Ultima Online, there used to be this kind of like web show that they released where it was like people reading the news about events that would happen in the game. And since so many of those events were like kind of like player managed and player run events, it was like they would tell the outcome of things. And it was just this like kind of like meta thing that happened that came out of the actual developer that always stuck with me, that I thought was the coolest thing ever. Like I would be in high school, listening to these like audio pieces that would come out for the game that I wanted to play, because I was sitting around in class thinking about this game that I wanted to play instead of being in class. Nice. And that kind of idea always sort of stuck with me. And I think that was like the seed of the idea to start doing a podcast for Final Fantasy XI. And that's sort of like a long explanation about how I still stayed involved with online games. I played EverQuest. Like I developed a really healthy interest in MMOs and their development. There was another one called Horizons that was very short-lived. And
I never heard of that one.
And died out very quickly. It was actually published by Atari. And it was one of these where, like, they promised a consistently dynamic world that would change based on player actions. Like, if you cut down a tree, then that tree would be cut down until it regrows. You know, like that kind of cool stuff. Like, those kind of forward-thinking ideas got me hooked, but none of that was ever actually delivered in the product. And so, you know, when I finally found Final Fantasy XI, you know, I had played a long string of games, and I think I was still sticking to UO, and Final Fantasy XI. I really liked Final Fantasy, and I really liked online games, and so you know, I got involved when I was, you know, I think it was a junior, senior in high school, played, and then went to college. And at college, I met other people who played, who ended up being, you know, the crew of Limit Break Radio. And that's and that that seed of the idea of like you can have a show and something that exists kind of like within the meta narrative of the game and sort of like address it as like this in-game thing. And that's sort of like where the very seed of the idea for Limit Break Radio began.
Nice. So speaking of 11 and the show, I mean, how long did you end up playing 11 before you decided to start the podcast?
I think I had been playing for, I mean, probably a good 2 years at that point. I hadn't met Kahlo, Kahlo was really the guy. You know, when I met him, it was like, oh, I found another Final Fantasy XI player who like gets the stuff that I'm talking about, and we can have really interesting discussions. And it was sort of like we would talk about it in a way that like our friends would be like, oh, this is interesting, and like we want to get into this too. And that's how we ended up getting them into it.
So I didn't get into podcasts until a couple years ago. I mean, when did you guys start? Like 2006?
2006, yeah, was when we had started the podcast. And you know, I guess that had really come around because I was you know, we had all went to the same college, and at college I was studying broadcast communications and political science, and you know, a lot of what you think about when you're studying broadcasting is, oh my God, what am I going to do once I graduate? Because there are literally no jobs in broadcasting.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
the slow death of radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if we really want to, I mean, hell, if we really want to get into it, we can get into it. But, you know, jobs in broadcasting, both on television and in radio, have just been going away. It's so much easier now with computers and digital recording to be able to send audio to other places quickly and easily. And so you end up with, you know, 5 or 6 cities in the United States with one voice on it, you know, one person who's doing all of that work that would normally do the work that, you know, 5 or 6 people would have to do. And that cuts down on jobs big time. And then, you know, you've got this, you don't always need somebody who's running the programming. Like that used to be a very real thing. Computers, you couldn't just load up a playlist and have that run overnight.
Press shuffle.
Yeah.
Yeah. You used to have somebody sitting there the entire time. And so, yeah, like jobs are just not, it's not a healthy industry.
What were podcasts like back then? I gotta ask.
Podcasts back then,
yeah.
You know, it was very much an emerging idea, but there were, you know, like the charge back then was very much being led by This American Life. There was a lot of like really established terrestrial broadcast properties that were kind of making the jump over to podcasts,
NPR stuff.
Yeah, and kind of becoming successful that way. But then there were also, this was just around the time that WTF with Mark Maron was starting to come around. I think that started in 2007. And that was really as a result of the demise of Air America, which was where Mark Maron had hosted a show prior to that. And, you know, as we kind of all know the legend of how WTF started. He started it in his, you know, in his garage. And so it was sort of like, you know, all of these different places, all of these different podcasts were sort of springing up. And really, you know, kind of actually what sort of drove me to get involved in Final Fantasy XI podcasting, because I mean, I was aware of podcasts in general just because of my overall interest in media and the way that media trends go. Like that's something I'm interested in outside of my work with Limit Break Radio. Like that's something I've been interested in since, you know, since I was like 17, 18 years old, you know, studying and researching media trends and media growth and how media organizations operate. Has always been, you know, just it's been a huge obsession of mine, to the point where I bore other people with the nonsense that I discover or that I research about it. But you know, so I was aware of this emerging trend. And the other thing is that as a Final Fantasy XI player, I was seeking out that same experience that I had with Ultima Online, with that really creative kind of news show. And it made me, you know, since that stuck in my brain, it made me wonder, okay, well, what exists out there, you know, because Final Fantasy, I was not like, you know, I was not like a beta tester for Final Fantasy XI. I didn't get it even at launch. Like I got it maybe at, you know, a couple of months after it had launched, maybe a year, even close to a year after it had launched. And so it made me wonder, like, okay, what exists out there in terms of like, you know, I want to listen to people talk about Final Fantasy XI while I walk to class. What is there out there for me?
What was there?
There was one other show at that time called, I think it was, well, I'm sorry, there were a couple of other shows. There was a show called Mega Elixir, which I think had wrapped up their production at that point. And then there was Pet Food Alpha.
They're still around, aren't they?
I think it's beta
yeah,
now.
They're called Pet Food Beta.
Pet Food Beta, yeah.
I think they have different hosts now, but yeah, they are still around. But Fusion X still does a podcast for Final Fantasy 14 called Aetheryte Radio.
Ah, yes.
And, which was actually something that I had helped him establish when they had gotten that off the ground. But we can get to that when
we will. I got a question about that later.
Yeah, when we get to the FF14 stuff. But actually, so I had found Pet Food Alpha, and you know, I liked the show. I enjoyed the show. Enough that I actually had at one point sent an email to Fusion X, and I was like, "Hey, I'm a radio producer. You know, I make imaging and intros and outros in my spare time, and I do voice work. You know, I'd love to be involved with your show. Is there anything you know, that I could do for you guys?" And I heard nothing back. Like I didn't get a response at all. And I'll be honest, I felt a little bit dogged out by it, and I was like, all right, well, you know, fuck it. Like, you know,
make my own.
Yeah, that's kind of,
you know, it's like your show's all right, but fuck it. I can do something better, you know, and so that was sort of like kind of the driving reason that made me think like between the you know, the friends that were getting into it and my discussions with Kahlo and everything like that, because I don't know that Kahlo even had like a whole ton of aspiration to do something like this, and it was really like, yeah, it was sort of like the rejection that I had gotten was sort of like, all right, fuck this, I'm gonna do it, like yeah. Like it got me like really gung-ho about it. And so you know, I approached Kahlo about doing the idea. In fact, at the time he was doing a play, he was doing a version of Romeo and Juliet. And I had this idea, and me and my girlfriend at the time traveled out to where he was doing the play and the performance, and brought the intro. Like I had made like a rough version of the LBR intro, and put it together. And I remember playing it for him out in the car. Like I'd talked to him about the idea, and he was sort of lukewarm on it. Like, yeah, maybe, like, I don't know if I can devote a ton of time to something like that, but it sounds like a lot of fun. Like this might be kind of cool. And then like when I played the intro for him, it got him to be all gung ho about it. Like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. Like, you know what I mean? And so we started to put the crew together. And over the summer, we had sort of, you know, just our enthusiasm about the game and stuff. We had we had gotten my roommate Sale and then his roommate Arjit Lam interested in the game, and they were playing it pretty regularly. And so, you know, we approached them about the idea, and they were kind of into it. And so that was like the first year of Limit Break Radio. Is you know, we would take some of the old equipment. I had a band at one point. It was a really terrible punk band, and I took some of the old equipment that I had from that. It was a PA head and a bunch of stage mics and 100-foot mic cables. Ooh. And that was the original setup for Limit Break Radio. We hauled that stuff into the basement of the dorm that we all lived in and set it up with a laptop to record it, and kind of just made it up as we went along. And yeah, that was pretty much how the whole thing started. And I have to give credit where credit is due. Kahlo is the one that came up with the brilliant name Limit Break Radio. I tend to come up with really.
What was the original name?
Sorry?
What names did you come up with?
Oh, I don't even remember.
Okay.
I don't know that it's been honestly, it's been so long. You know, like it's fortunate that you guys are kind of catching me today and asking me about the history of the show, because just last night on our Twitch stream, we had played probably like 3 hours worth of clips from the old 11 days. Like we had some set aside, like of our, you know, like quote unquote greatest hits from 1.0. And so we sat around listening to those and commenting about those for about 3 hours. And it is shocking the level of stuff that you forget about a show that you've been doing solidly for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like there's the stuff that just fades into obscurity is amazing. And they were remembering stuff that I was just like, oh my God, you're right. That did happen like that. Like, there's no way that I could possibly even, I mean, like maybe like Level Up Radio or, you know, like I don't know. I think Link Shell Radio was one that we had toyed around with, but there was another podcast that did like 4 episodes under that name. So we could, like how often does that happen, right? Like you come up with a great name and then you're like, oh, another person did a podcast about that in 2004 for like 4 episodes.
We were looking at like a spin-off podcast about Legend of Zelda. I was going to get some of my other like friends to go host it, and we thought of what was it? Hey Listen, right? A Legend of Zelda podcast, and someone else.
I'm sure that's a thing.
Someone else did it on YouTube, and we were like, no.
Yeah. What's funny though is you guys' origin story is like essentially the same, where Joe is you and I am. Callow, is that the other guy? Yeah.
Callow, yeah.
Yeah, because he's
the
like...
band and the equipment.
The equipment, you came to me, you're like, hey, there's no podcasts out there about the main series except for, you know, the big one in Britain. And then I'm like, yeah, it seems fun. I want to play the series anyway. And then I seriously thought Limit Break Radio, that'd be a cool thing, or Limit Break. And then we look it up and we're like, damn it. That's what we're taking. That was seriously one of the suggestions I gave. But
yeah, well, I mean, we were, and the thing is that we almost did. This is something you just knocked something loose. Look at that. We almost didn't go with Limit Break Radio, and there's a very important reason why. It's a great name, and I'm so glad that we stuck with it, given everything in FF14, how crucial limit breaks are to that story. But I feel the need to point this out. Nowhere in FF11 do limit breaks exist as a thing. Like that was actually a really, really terrible choice for a name for an FF11 podcast.
I guess they're like TP moves, right?
No, those are weapon skills, homie.
Oh, weapon skills.
Yeah, those are limit breaks. The only thing that was even called a limit break were they're technically called Genkai quests, which were the quests the level cap quest that would get you from 50 to 55 or whatever. And those were the only thing that were ever at any time ever called limit breaks. And that was one of the things that I was concerned with. I was like, Limit Break Radio is a fantastic name and I love it, but like limit breaks aren't a part of this game. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm so glad that was the choice that we ended up going with in the long run, because, you know, and this was Kahlo's argument at the time, that Limit Break is such a a strong, powerful thing in the Final Fantasy universe.
Right. You think Limit Break, you think Final Fantasy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's so intrinsically linked to Final Fantasy that, we're the message is being delivered, and the name is too good to let go. And he was totally right. He was absolutely right. So
how did the show build? You started this in the basement of your dorm.
Yes.
What did it become in those first couple of years? Like, how did it start? Like, with you guys in a basement versus what it became after 2 years into the run.
Yeah. So so we had always envisioned the show as a bit of a Howard Stern ripoff. I come from Detroit, so my big point of context for a morning show was Drew and Mike. But back when I was when I was a kid and growing up, and I recognize that this has changed a lot now, but there used to be regional morning shows. And in some instances there still are, but there used to be these great regional morning shows that would be really fantastic in their own right. Right. Like they had a foothold in their city. Detroit was kind of like that. Like Howard Stern tried to come into Detroit, could never move the needle in the city because Drew and Mike were they were loved by Detroit. And so that was really my big kind of point of contact for influence in terms of talk radio and how I put together a show. And honestly, I've done a lot of other shows besides Limit Break Radio. I did a punk rock show for years called Adrenaline, and had a couple of co-hosts that did that with me. Weirdly, all of them named Kevin. I don't know how that ended up working out. That was totally unintentional, but yeah, that all happened to be my co-host was always a Kevin. And
we got two Calebs that show up.
Yeah.
we get an extra Caleb, and it gets weird.
It's so well, but it was like I did the show for a year with it was me and Kevin, and then I did the show for a year alone, and then I met an entirely different Kevin to come do the show with me the next year. You know what I mean? Like it was just I don't know. I should just audition Kevin's. Yeah. But yeah, I did that. I did that for 3.5 years. I did Adrenaline, and that structure was totally ripped off of Drew and Mike. I was like, it's Drew and Mike, but with playing punk rock. And then, Limit Break Radio is basically just Drew and Mike talking about video games. Refresh, which was a show that I did in the interim between the 11 version and 14 version of Limit Break Radio, is just Drew and Mike with hip hop. And that's really my kind of my bread and butter, where that's my wheelhouse. That's where I feel the most comfortable with a crew of people, and maybe not necessarily playing music, but I also do like playing music. So structurally, that's where we had started in that first year. It was okay, we're gonna when we started the 11 show, there was also this very real thing in FF11 where information about the game was kind of scant and spread out around a lot of different places on the internet.
Was this pre FF11 wiki?
No, because the FF11 wiki was definitely around, because that provided literally every piece of content.
That was very important to us a few months ago. That was the only place that we could go.
It really is. Yeah. It's sort of like that now, where all the information you find is out of date. That's kind of how it was back then too. And of course the game provides literally no context for anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
They're
we know.
Yes.
It's so any command from an NPC is the most vague thing, and you're like, what the
going into the menu to trade the item to him, I was like, fuck.
Oh, I know, it's infuriating. So anyway, because that was such a huge aspect of FF11, we were like, okay, there should be a didactic portion of the show. The show should not just be, it should be entertaining, and we want it to be entertaining, but the bulk of our content can come from things that we don't necessarily have to experience firsthand. Because that was one of the things that we were actually really self-conscious about when we started the show. None of us
didn't know enough.
None of us were level 75. None of us had even hit the level cap when we had started Limit Break Radio. And so we were really self-conscious of the fact that we don't know a whole lot about this game. And so, there's an opportunity. Like, I think for a while we approached it as like, there's an opportunity not only for us to teach people, like teach newer players about the game that they may find confusing, but there's also this opportunity for us to learn vicariously through other people, through their context and what they bring to the show, which is why in the 11 days we had such a focus on guest hosts. We had a different guest host for nearly every episode that would be there to talk about a specific thing.
I was going to
be outside of our range of context. Yeah.
It seemed like you guys went through a lot of co-hosts.
We did.
But
well, they were guest hosts. It was sort of like the guest hosts were meant to be transitory. The actual hosts of the show, yes, we did go through a lot of different lineup changes. That is true, especially in the later years. But the guest hosts, the idea behind that is that they would change each and every episode. So, the idea really there was to, like, we know we're not experts, so we're going to bring somebody on who is.
Right.
And so that was where the very, again, didactic, very, like we sought to like teach people things and inform and instead of entertain. And I think that's what, that's kind of what led to some of those episodes being so long and bloated and
that's what we're all about.
Yeah.
and kind of boring. Like a lot of those 11 shows are literally, like, again, some guests were better than others. Some guests were really animated and really, could talk about their points very cogently. Other guests we had to do some, some heavy lifting for. And if you don't have the context, if you're not sure-footed there, it's like you're just literally reading off of a wiki page, and that got boring. Like that got boring, not just for I think the audience, but that got boring for us to do as just making the show.
Mm-hmm. So you were talking about guest hosts. Now let's talk about like actual co-hosts. What was like? Walk us through some of the co-hosts you went through before the FF11 Limit Break Radio run, of course, ended.
Yeah. So our original lineup was myself, Kahlo, Sale, and Arjit-Lam.
Which one was the soft-spoken guy? I remember that guy at the beginning of a lot of your...
Yes, Sale had a really unique voice and was soft-spoken. Yeah, that's Sale.
What happened to that guy?
I actually saw him 2 days ago. I helped him build a new computer that he's hopefully going to be using for some streaming purposes. But he's still around. He just doesn't play FF14. He is a competitive Smash player, and he's been a competitive Smash player ever since the day I met him.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, it was I liked Super Smash Brothers kinda before I started living with him. He was my roommate in college.
Too much.
I'll never play it again. He's a Peach player, so it's not just that he kicks your ass, like he kills, like wipes the floor with you, and he does it with Peach, and he does it in a way that makes you really feel bad about yourself. It's amazing to watch. It's totally incredible to watch when he's just like, when he is on and like on a roll, but you do not want to be playing against him. So, that's where he has been devoting a lot of his time and attention recently, has been to smashing and being a little bit more involved with the regional community. And, he played FF14 for a little bit. He played the 1.0 version of FF14, but, didn't really stick with it. And so, if he possibly has more free time in the future, he said that he'd like to get into it. So we may very well see a return of Sale to Limit Break Radio yet. But he's just been doing other stuff.
Yeah, that's just the one guy. When I was listening to your original stuff, after we of course played FF11 like I don't know how many months ago, like 5-6 months ago.
Yeah, about 6.
And
I saw some of your Let's Plays. Yeah, they were really good.
we of course did all the Bastock missions just to say that we kind of beat the game.
Yeah.
And I remember going back and listening and being like, this guy is not on Limit Break Radio anymore. So I wanted to ask.
Yeah, he's still around. He's definitely still a presence. The last time he was on one of our streams was New Year's. He came out for a big LBR reunion New Year's Eve party, which was that was super fun. But no, he's definitely still around. So Arjit Lam, though, I'm sure that was going to be your next question.
Mm-hmm.
Arjit Lam was actually the very first person. And by the way, I want to mention Sale stuck around all the way to almost the very end. I think he may have been absent from the last 3 or 4 episodes in the FF11 days, but he never formally made an exit. He just got kind of busy with other stuff. The first person to actually formally exit the show was Arjit Lam. And I think he got just kind of overwhelmed with the project. I mean, we were all going to school at the time, and trying to balance doing this show and also a big part of the FF11 days of Limit Break Radio. We had a forum that got quite popular and populated, and we felt responsible for what happened on those forums, and they were drama magnets.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It was really bad, to the point where it stressed a lot of us out in real life to degrees that really, like, it probably shouldn't have. You know what I mean? Like, none of us were ready for it. Like, we kind of like put forums there as an afterthought. Like, we started doing the show really not even expecting that many people to pick up on it. You know what I mean? And it, like, I think it was after 4 or 5 episodes. I mean, we had just a very basic hosting package on, like a whatever web server. Mm-hmm. And after 4 episodes, we were maxing out our bandwidth within 2 days of dropping an episode for the month. Like our site would be up for 2 days, and then it would be down for 28 because we would max out our bandwidth because so many people were hitting our MP3s.
Wow.
Now, was that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good problem. Like we actually just went through this again. We just saw another uptick in our audience numbers, and DreamHost, which was actually when we had this problem the first time, this bandwidth problem, we moved to DreamHost servers. That was in like early to we launched in August of 2006. I would say that it was like September, October. We were jumping to DreamHost. Like, it was that quick that we were putting out episodes and they were getting that popular. And DreamHost had this wonderful package at the time where it had a terabyte of bandwidth right out of the gate for $9.99 a month, and then every month you were subscribed after that, it gave you another terabyte. So, like, it was just like the best hosting package that we could imagine. And of course, that became
limited right now.
Like, it became unlimited at some point, and like that was just the host that was just the host package that they gave us. But so, like, it's sort of funny because that problem became repeated just kind of in a different way more recently, because we saw an uptick in our audience numbers, and the memory that was allocated to our site, because we were on a shared server plan. We were maxing out the memory because so many people were hitting our MP3s on release day. So I'd be trying to log into my own website, getting internal 500 errors and 503 errors.
Wow.
Because the memory was maxed out. And it would be like that for like 3 or 4 days, and so we had to bump up to a VPS, and we haven't had a problem.
Yeah, we know about that, right?
No, we don't. we host our stuff on Libsyn, and we got the website. We just switched our website over to DreamHost, so hopefully they'll treat us well.
Yeah,
good choice. Yeah, no, you're in good hands with those folks, because they try, because a VPS is actually it can get pretty expensive depending on what your needs are. And being a show that's been around for 10 years, we have pretty significant archives, and their restricting factor on their VPS is how much disk space you get per plan.
Right.
And so, much to their credit, they tried very hard to work with us to optimize the site on the shared plan for all of the traffic that we were getting, and it was just far too overwhelming for their hardware. And as soon as we switched over to the VPS, all of that problem just disappeared. So they tried to work with us to work with what we had, and then when it was clear that it was just like, look, this is what you're going to have to do to serve your audience, that's what we did. And so all credit to DreamHost. They did their due diligence in working with us. So
nice.
You're in good hands. They'll treat you well.
So I gotta ask, back to the show.
I was going through some of the former voices. So Arjit Lam left. That was after about a year. And then it was around that same time, maybe a little bit before then, that we had actually introduced the idea of an intern character early on in the show, because that's something that it seems like all radio shows have. All of my favorite ones have. They have like some off mic character who's kind of a dim-witted boob that all of the hosts fuck with the entire time, and it was real
clown.
The clown. And it was really important to me that role be present on Limit Break Radio, because I just love that dynamic. And early on, we had a friend of ours, Wally, who we had asked to do it. But the thing was, we were like, you don't have to be in studio. Like, we knew him. He didn't even live in the state. And we just wanted to use his personality and his presence and his name. And he was going to be like the silent intern, so that we would always just we would play off of him and make him do stupid shit in the studio. And we thought he had a really thick skin, could kind of roll with the punches. And that's why we had asked him to do it. Turns out he had thinner skin than anyone and got super defensive at everything, and was like absolutely the wrong choice to do that, and caused all kinds of personal drama and internal conflict. And so it was just a disaster. And we asked our friend Juxta, basically, if he would mind doing it, because he had context for MMOs, but wasn't necessarily an FF11 player. He was a big WoW player and a big WoW raider. He was super into the endgame WoW scene. And so we asked him to fill this role, because we knew he was someone. He was a personality, a person that could roll with the punches and understand the joke and be in on the joke and be in on the gag and kind of take the abuse. And he would also be able to be there to kind of defend himself, which we recognized was a mistake with Wally, that we didn't even give him. We didn't even really understand what we were doing at that time, so we couldn't even really predict how things like the audience would react to him, or the things that they would say to him on the forums that would kind of be out of line or surprising, or be like, whoa. And after you do this for a while, and you get an audience, you kind of learn that's kind of what happens. But none of us knew to prepare him for that. So with Juxta, he just fell into the role completely naturally, and was so good at it. And in fact, became such a staple and a loved part of the show that I think that's what really motivated him to become interested in playing FF11 more. And at one point, he was playing more of FF11 than anyone else on the cast, and knew more about the game than anyone else on the cast. And so, it was kind of cool, how he, we never asked him hey man, play a couple hours of FF11 just to kind of, so what to talk about on the show or something. He just totally got into it because, he really genuinely liked the role he had on the show, and really genuinely liked doing the show and found it fun. And obviously he's still involved. He's a full-fledged.
Yeah, he stuck around.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's a rock, man. And I know it sounds weird. He was always, there was never, in terms of our friendship dynamic, off the mic, he was never the dude that we picked on when we were all hanging out together, right? That was not his dynamic. So it was totally it's totally cool to see him fall into that role and be awesome and hilarious and commit to that role. When our off mic dynamic is actually quite.
He adds a lot of humor to the show now.
He does. Oh, totally. He does. He's hysterical. And now now that we've given him purview over the drops, he's becoming really good at that. Like that's really, like, I've heard legitimate radio shows on terrestrial radio that can't get that shit down, and he's doing a great job. So yeah, I really. It's been really cool to watch him, like, and he's not like a public personality or like a broadcaster either. You know what I mean? Like, with Kahlo, he was studying to become a actor. Like he's a performer. Right. With Juxta, I don't remember what he studied. Accounting? I think that's what he studied. And so
that fits, right? Yeah.
to watch him become and grow into such an amazing performer has really, I mean, it's been really fantastic. He's great. I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's genuinely one of the funniest people I know, and he brings so much humor to the table that, like, it's tough to do a show when he's not available. It's tough to do a show when, like, the magic of Limit Break Radio is really all of the five of us as a crew when we're together. I think that something is lost when any one of us can't make it to an episode, and so that can be kind of frustrating for me sometimes, to be honest with you. But yeah, Juxta obviously stayed involved with the show. I'm trying to think of how it went from there. We had Gamer, who was technically a host, although never really was very much of a presence on air. And really, we made him a host because he was the only other Final Fantasy XI player that we knew on campus that could come in and do the show.
And you
live.
needed that full kind of everybody in the room talking together. We have a totally different dynamic on our show where it's just me and Caleb.
Yeah,
so
we're both the
we break each other down all the time. We're cutting each other off, but we do not have the same amount of energy as you guys have, and we're kind of jealous of that, honestly.
Yeah.
It's but like that level of energy is easier to maintain when it's shared between five people.
Yes.
And also we have a problem. And we're getting better about this, but especially when we started getting acclimated to our new equipment setup, we had a lot of problems with crosstalk where we would just have two people talking at once or three people talking, trying to talk over each other, which, I think we're getting better about. But, when you only have two, that's a bit of an easier dynamic to work with. And it's not like, two is a good dynamic. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really fantastic radio shows that are, that they have that have only really two voices on there, and it can be really successful. So although I will give us this, even though the magic of LBR is having all five of us in the studio, even when we do a show like we did last week where we only have three people, we still are able to maintain a very good, pretty consistent show. And that's something that I'm pretty proud of and pretty pleased with. So that's how Gamer got involved with the show, and he literally just disappeared. I think he's a dentist somewhere. I see him. I'm still friends with him on Facebook. I see him post every once in a while. It was funny. Not too long ago, maybe a month or two ago, he said he was listening to songs from the FF11 soundtrack and was getting all nostalgic and tagged me and Nika and Kahlo in a post. But that's all we've ever heard from him in the time since the show. It's not a joke that we literally don't know where he is. We have no idea what that dude's up to.
Oh, wow.
Although to bring Arjitlam full circle, though, that dude is he lives in, I don't know where in Asia, but he became a teacher, like an English teacher, out in like China or Japan or somewhere out in one of those Asian countries, and that's what he does now, and seems to be very, very happy doing that. So his involvement with Limit Break Radio didn't seem to impact his trajectory at all, fortunately, because honestly, this is not Limit Break Radio is not something you put on your resume delicately, because an employer going to the site and hitting play, it's like, what is this?
What the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, fortunately we didn't harm his reputation too much. Let's see who else. After that, I think we ended up, we had Irufalian as an intern who was, he was another roommate of mine. He was mine and Sale's roommate, and he was around for a little bit. Didn't make, he was just there for a while and just a voice, and then disappeared. And then we made Nika a host because she was another one. She lived in the same college town that we did. And that was for a pretty limited time. And then it kind of became clear that scheduling was becoming a big issue. And so we had launched the Limit Break Radio Network and decided that we were going to allow anyone who hosted a show, because, if we gave you a show on the network, then you could probably hold it down as a host for LBR. We started to tap them as hosts for the show. And that's where things started to kind of get a bit chaotic and break down.
All those offshoot shows and...
Yeah, we had a lot of supplementary shows and stuff like that. We wanted to try to expand our scope and cover more of FF11, which for a game that was kind of shrinking, it was not exactly the greatest content strategy long term. But we did, but there was this very real thing that we had this community, this forum community that had grown, and there was a lot of really talented people that were in there that were expressing, that they wanted to make podcasts. And I think the idea there was, well, instead of letting them be competitors, why don't we offer
Join us.
Yeah, why don't we offer them access to our audience so that they have more of a potential for accessing people, and we get to grow our brand. And so that's where you got shows like Elegantly Edwith and He Says, She Says, and Voices of Vana'diel, which all of those shows were like, they were headed up by people that were, just like fans of Limit Break Radio. Tom too got definitely way more involved with the production of the show a little bit later on. But yeah, like that was just people approaching me with good ideas. And I was like, okay, well, do you want to do a show on the LBR network? And that's where that idea had kind of come out. And then because we had those talented people doing shows like that, we also thought, okay, well, why don't we take the talent that we have internally and make shows for them too, which is where you got things like Simply Juxta and the Rogues Den. And it was I think it was a good idea. Because we did have a lot of momentum back in those days and a lot of people were listening. But in the end, it was a lot of work and it spread ourselves very, very, very thin.
So how did this all come to an end?
The good stuff.
That's a fantastic question. To be honest, it petered out is what happened. So I was maintaining the production of Limit Break Radio all the way up until when I moved out of my apartment that I lived in college, and then had to move back in with my parents, and my girlfriend at the time moved in with me and my parents. So my intention was, when I had moved back in, it's just sort of weird. This is like a really personal, like part of my life that I don't really kind of talk about. I don't think I've ever talked about this publicly. So this is
I've looked. I wanted to know how the original show ended, and I could never find anything.
There's not much.
Yeah, there really isn't. There really isn't. Because it's sort of an intensely personal story about what happened. So during the recording of episode number 64, which I think was the last one, you actually hear me duck out early. Like I duck out in the last hour of the show, and I let Juxta and Tom 2 wrap the show. And that was the end. That was the end of the FF11 run. And what happened was I had gotten a phone call in the middle of that show from my girlfriend at the time, who told me that her, because we had both just moved home from college, and we were both kind of getting acclimated to living with our parents again. She lived pretty close to me we'd kind of grown up in a similar area. Like, we didn't meet at college. We actually met before college and then went to the same college. It was a 10-year-long relationship. And
wow.
Yeah, I know, right? We met in high school. We went to college the entire time, stayed together the entire time, and then she moved in. We moved back home, and then so I got this call in the middle of episode 64 where she goes, "My sister just punched me in the face and I no longer feel safe at my house. Will you come pick me up so I can stay with you?" That's why I left an hour early on episode number 64. Real shit. Hashtag real talk here.
Wow.
Damn.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that, though. That really shed some light there. Did you just decide never to do another episode after that?
No. That's not what happened. No.
Okay. All right. Well.
No.
Damn.
So I went and I got her, and she started to stay with me at my parents' house. And first of all, as you guys know, you need an entirely silent environment to record a good show.
Right.
And
yes, we
and we were sharing a single room in my parents' house, and she was never really comfortable with my parents and had a very strained relationship with them for some reason that she had invented in her head. And she was just really shitty. She was just really she couldn't. It was like unreasonable to ask her to leave my room for a couple of hours while I did a show, or to ask her to be completely silent. Like, that was apparently an unfair request. And so the fighting that would ensue when I would try to do a show or try to schedule a show were so bad that made me basically avoid wanting to do shows anymore, until I came up with Refresh, which included her participation in it, and that seemed to be able to satiate her. But because I was doing Refresh, and honestly, I will be honest, I had lost all interest in FF11. I was not playing FF11. 14 1.0 had kind of launched, and that was underwhelming. I was very, very disappointed with Square Enix overall. I was bummed out. I was bummed out on the product. There was no direction that 1.0 was going. I mean, I still did maintain, in those days, I was maintaining doing Aetheryte Radio. And I had started up Refresh, which I had started on the Gamer Escape Radio Network. And between doing those two shows, it was like I had every intention on doing a Limit Break Radio episode. And in fact, I really wanted to do a final episode where we said goodbye.
See, that's what I was looking for. I was like, when did they?
Yeah, and that offered closure, and the opportunity just never presented itself, right? Like, it was just between the other stuff that I was doing and this bitch of a girlfriend that I had to deal with and living in my fucking parents' house. Like, I was unhappy as a person. I was not, that was not a particularly good time in my life. It was just it was not something that I could do, I couldn't do it emotionally. I couldn't find time to do it. I couldn't do it physically. Like, there was nothing in me to be able to bring that to closure. All of us had kind of all of the different crew members had moved away to different cities. I hadn't had a whole lot of contact with them in that time. And it was just it became at some point, after some good amount of time, it seemed like it was better to just let it peter out than to bother all of these people to do a last hurrah. I had every intention in my heart to do it, and it was I got to do that at some point. I got to offer some closure. And I tried to put out some apologies or explanations in terms of blog posts, but that was it. I could never really ever bring myself to record a final goodbye. And there was always a part of me that kind of wanted to pick it back up too.
Right. And and that's funny that you mentioned that, because I chose the podcast over the woman. So
did you really, Caleb?
Kind of, yeah. It was consuming all of my time because we're going through the entire series, and I'm like, man, I want I want to play this game. I don't want to just beat it. I want to beat the shit out of it. I want to try to do every little mission and like just hundreds of hours going into these damn things. And shit goes downhill when they start trying to interfere with the show. But yeah, I totally know what you mean. There have been, there's always slumps after a while when, it's just like, God, it's this, it's all old stuff, and you just kind of get into these downers.
Totally. And then so and I sort of feel like that's what Refresh was. It was just like, God, I want to talk about anything else. I don't care what it is. Yes, I'll smoke weed on air and fucking play hip hop and talk about politics and be really inappropriate, because that's what my friends wanted to do. Like that was the show that my friends wanted to do. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'll be along for that ride. That sounds like a whole lot of fun. And that's what we did. And it was super fun, but like nobody really wanted to listen to it. And especially none of the LBR audience really wanted to listen to it. And I kind of thought like, hey, yeah, I'm going to pivot the audience that I grew during Limit Break Radio. That did not happen.
They don't follow. They don't follow. We know, man.
At all. And it was just like, like I was just like, yeah, I just want to talk about anything else. And then, after that show kind of ended in a mess and a disaster, I was kind of left projectless, and Limit Break Radio came back up because 2.0 was launching, and suddenly, like I was interested, and I was putting out feelers for other people that were interested, and suddenly Kahlo and Juxta kind of came up as being interested in the game, and as soon as we started talking, like as soon as I got Kahlo and Juxta, as soon as I got Juxta on board, really, I was like, okay, I can make this happen. And then I got Escalia, and then Kahlo came along later, and then we brought Nika on. But we had adjusted a lot in the transition between the 11 show and the 14 show, just in the way that we approach doing the show, programming the show, that shifted between the two. And so, yeah, like we never really ever resolved the 11 show, but
but you came back like a year later. How long was that? How long was the time in between the two?
It was probably a year and a half. It was probably a year and a half. I had to end that relationship to be able to that was kind of the other thing about that relationship, is that she resented Limit Break Radio because of how much time it took up in my life. And she also liked to claim credit for things for Limit Break. She was like, I came up with the idea for Limit Break Radio. I was like, no, the fuck you didn't. The fuck are you talking about, you dumb bitch? No, you fucking didn't. Like, that was, I hated that shit. And I always thought that was so stupid of her. And so, yeah, like she would resent it, and she would get like, it would be a fight every time I would do the show, even going back to like when we were at college. But it was just like it was sort of like, how like sometimes there are people, and this is kind of sad, but there are people who will go to the bar to get away from their shrew of a wife. That's sort of what Limit Break Radio was for me for a while. It was like 3 hours where I could turn off my phone, and I knew I wasn't going to be assaulted by this woman that I lived with. You know what I mean? It was just like, God, it was terrible. And honestly, yeah, that relationship had to end for me to come back to Limit Break Radio, because she had made it so toxic. Like I would get like acid reflux really bad when I would think about trying to schedule a Limit Break Radio because of the fights that it would cause. And it was stupid. It was, yeah, I know. It was ridiculous that a relationship that I could have would have that much of an impact on a project, or like my, my enthusiasm for a project. Cause it did in a lot of ways. It just it made it unfun for me. There was actually a lot of things in the 11 days that made the project unfun for me, but so many people were into what we were doing that's what kept me doing it. But the forums were super unfun. My girlfriend at the time, that was super unfun. Trying to manage people and schedule things, that was super unfun. But I did all of that because the reward was the people. and the audience. And I loved that, and I craved that so much that I was just like, yeah, fine, whatever. I'll trudge through this bullshit in my personal life and get to the other side of it. And I mean, you know, there are some shows that you hear it wearing on me. Like you could tell that I had just gotten in after this big blow up fight, and I was just like, fuck everything, you know. Like that was probably the hardest thing about doing the 11 show, was just like my incredibly dysfunctional personal life at the time.
That'll kill it.
Wow.
That's
I had no idea.
Yeah,
no one does.
You don't hear it on the episodes. I completely disagree.
No one does. No one has ever asked about that. So it's like I've never had the chance to talk about it.
We're
but
here
like,
for
totally,
you, man.
That's 100% of what was happening.
Wow.
We got our little pads and pens out and kicking back in our easy chairs. No, yeah, I mean, it gets you.
I'm not. Everyone goes through that shit. You know, like it's just personal bullshit. It's just personal drama. Like whatever. But you know, like it definitely did have a pretty big impact on the way that I could produce the show. And now that I don't have any of those restrictions, like I think I'm like able to run a way better show now because of it, because it's like I don't have somebody trying to micromanage my time, and I can devote as much or as little time to the project as needed. So you know, that's a lot of people don't think about that, but like that has a huge impact on the way that a project plays out.
All right, you ready to talk about a radio returns?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, definitely.
Can we just go straight into it?
Actually, that break sounds pretty good.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, I need to get something to drink here because
get some water.
I'm starting to get that foam that forms at the corners of your mouth when you've been talking for way too long. Yeah.
You want to take a 5-minute break?
5 minutes sounds good.
Well, that was a nice first half. The break that we took was actually a whole week.
Yeah. He stayed on hold for us.
Yeah, so next week you get to hear part 2 in which he talks about A Radio Reborn, which is the new Limit Break Radio, the Limit Break Radio that's been around for a little over a year. And it's gonna be good too, man.
Oh yeah, it was.
He got really personal at the end there, and I was not expecting that, but I'm really glad he did.
Yeah,
that was something I always wanted to know. I always wanted to know what happened to the original show. There was never any sign off. There was never any goodbye, guys. It just
dropped
was
off.
Not there for over a year, and then it came back later as a radio return. So
yeah, awesomely clever name too.
ARR.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess.
Well, let's answer at least one question before we get out of here.
All right. We'll take a look at him.
Okay.
All right, so first question, and maybe only question, depending on what we decide to do.
Let's answer 2.
All right, this one is from Void on the forums. He is an Ultima weapon, and he is also kind of doing the same thing we did. He's already done with it, though. He's got his own little blog. It's Green Mushroom, agreenmushroom.com, where you can see his review of the Final Fantasy series.
Except he skipped 11.
He did, and his order is corrupt, but whatever. Yeah, so check that out. He does a lot of stuff with more recent games, too. He'll do, like, little tidbits of news and how he feels about it. So
I think we should do an episode with him.
We probably should.
Yeah.
So the question is titled, Best Final Fantasy for New Players. Hey, guys, after finishing up the main series, I came to the conclusion that FF10 is the Final Fantasy game that I will always recommend to newbies in the series. He thinks it's very approachable, kind of, and has the easiest gameplay mechanics to understand. It seems to be the most forgiving game in terms of gameplay, and it has a story that isn't overly convoluted. Now that you're almost done with the mainline games, I will put the question to you. What mainline Final Fantasy game would you recommend for players that have never before played a Final Fantasy?
Well, I think I have actually said this.
I feel like we may have mentioned
before.
it, yeah.
Probably not to a question, but there it is.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I'm going to... I don't know, man. I'm going to agree with him. I think 10 is probably the best one for a new.
I completely agree also, but I think it does depend on the gamer that you're talking to and kind of what games that they have played. If they've never played a turn-based game, I think you might want to go with 12.
Really?
Frankly, yeah.
Wow.
I don't think that's a bad place to start for someone who maybe really likes Western RPGs but is not used to a turn-based kind of atmosphere. I think 12 is. I think it'll ease them more into it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is super complex.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. If they've ever played an MMO, I think 12 would definitely be the one.
Yeah.
6 was probably my second choice, though.
6 is a second choice if you know someone who respects older games. Super NES games and stuff like that.
Yeah, if they're not super weird about old stuff, like how some people don't watch black and white movies or whatever.
Fuck those people, by the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say 6 also. 7's not a bad place to start either.
No, if you can get over the blocky.
Really, 6, 7, and 10, the best games in the series. They're also the easiest to get into. They're the simplest, I think.
Yeah,
to play.
They're not super hard. So
yeah, so I don't see why not those two or those three. One of those three. I think 10 is the best one though. Get the PS4, PS3 version of 10.
Yeah,
go for it.
Now that the PS4 version is a little bit repaired, it's good.
Yeah, I totally agree with Void on that.
Yeah, that's surprising. We agree with him this time. All right, so let's do another one here. This one's from Schnitzel Time from the forums. He's a Ultima weapon as well.
Wow. All these ranks are going to go away.
Yep, have fun while you can. It's titled Worst Way You've Died / Got Game Over in a Video Game. Let's make it specifically RPGs, not necessarily FF. I'd like to stick to RPGs, but if you have a really good one, something, a good Halo one or something, that's cool too. I think in the past I've mistakenly believed I had Reflect on my character when I planned to reflect a spell off him, only to find out that Reflect wore off and killed my caster, Vivi. Not a very specific example, but I feel like there's so many buried in my experiences, I just start to forget how embarrassing some of them are. There's also all the times in FF8 he's been killed accidentally in what otherwise would be an easy battle because he took his time drawing magic. Then in 7, when he tried to get the Shadow Flare enemy skill off Ultima Weapon, only to die and lose when he casted it. You guys got any good ones?
Wow.
I don't know, do you, Joe?
I've died so many times, it's hard to think of
Yeah,
one.
especially recently with 13. It's like, oh, random enemy? Yeah, guess what? It's better than you. Good night. It's sick if you don't do it right.
That's pretty accurate. Oh, I remember one just right now. I was in the orphan place, and there's kind of like that last enemy you got to fight before you can go into another hallway.
Real big guy.
He's rough, okay? Especially if you're not well leveled up. And before I decided to go back to Pulse and level up some more, I barely made it past that guy.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't make it past the next place. And so with one save point in between, which I had saved on, I was stuck in between two guys, one of which I had killed once, the other one I've killed no times.
Yeah, I saw Joe die to this guy at least 6 times. He was
I don't know
rocking.
how many times I went back. I was like, I have to get to Pulse. I have to go back the other hallway.
But it won't let you.
And I could not kill him for the longest time. So that was not necessarily a dumb death. That was a dumb save.
Yeah, one of those game-changing
It was a dumb save
files.
which ensured that I would die 99% of the time.
Well, and the crappy thing about that particular spot, too, is there wasn't anyone else to level up on. It was the guy that you can barely kill and the guy that you don't think you can kill it all because you haven't yet. So you're just screwed unless you get out of there, which you did, thankfully. Kind of. I mean, I would have thoroughly enjoyed you just restarting.
So bad, dude.
Doing a speed run last week, but all right, that's a good example. I've had cases in 9 where the same thing would happen with VV. Reflect would wear off. I'd hit him with a huge spell and just insta kill the guy, and that's always annoying.
I have accidentally targeted my own guys. That's happened more than once.
When you have it on memory, especially.
And yeah, if you have it on memory and you've clicked, and for some odd reason you had to hit yourself and then you just kill yourself. In 2 it happened a lot.
Yeah, there was I remember you because we figured out the attack spamming thing. We're like, oh yeah, this is wonderful. I'm doing sick amounts of damage. And then
just press X back, X back, X back, X back.
X 3 times, and then on the last guy
do it 100 times, and then you'll level up your stat once.
Yeah, and then we're like, oh, well, we can do the same thing with health. And then Joe goes in, he hits himself, and kills himself.
Yeah.
Goes in, hits himself, kills himself. And he's like, well, I got to restart the game now because I'm doing too much damage to myself, and I can't actually level up to the point where I can play the game without the HP increases. So that's a whole other can of worms that I don't ever want to experience again. Thank God they fixed that with more westernized models of the use it and get better system.
Yeah.
Let's see. Worst death.
I know in Halo 1, you brought up Halo 1, in the snow level, I'm not sure what it's called, but there's a ton of flood and shit. And me and Timo on the Xbox, we decided that we were going to play through the first Halo on Legendary.
All right.
And so we got to that level and everything was going fine. It's a rough game on Legendary, that first Halo. And then we got to this big open area with a ton of little offshoot rooms and stuff like that. And we found out that if you kind of stay to the side of one of the teleport things, you got one character that goes forward, and then in Halo, if they go forward far enough into a room, there's there's an event that happens that makes you transport to them.
Right, you teleport, yeah.
Okay. We figured out how to walk past that teleport thing. You got to hug the wall to the side. And if you do that, the event that triggers the enemies in the next room to start moving doesn't go off.
Oh, wow.
And so you keep one guy on the other side of that teleport thing, and then one guy walks around it and into the next room, and then all the guys are frozen there. And you and then you shoot them all like crazy, and then you have the other guy go back, and then you have the other guy trigger the event, and then they all just die.
Nice.
Which is awesome. But we ran out of ammo, and all the enemies ran out of ammo. There were no enemies left. And all there were wraiths with no ammo. So they were just running around. They had the light beam go off, and nothing would happen. And you couldn't get out of the area for some reason. We had glitched the game. So I had to kill myself. So when I think of weird deaths, there was nothing I could do. We glitched the game like crazy, and then the game,
got its revenge.
It got its revenge by not letting any bullet fly.
All right, I've got one actually.
Weird glitch.
Final Fantasy 12. I was doing the Death Scythe hunt. Kind of. I went into the area. I thought I had accepted the hunt, but sometimes I get a little overzealous, and I'm like, yeah, let's go kill this guy. So I run into the area. I spend about an hour in there trying to get this guy to appear, and I'm like, Jesus, why won't he show up? I'm leveling up. I've gained 3-4 levels, and that's a lot for 12, especially when you're around level 50s or so. And I'm like, God, guys, I don't know what's going on. I'm streaming the game, and one of the guys is like, did you accept it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. I don't know why I wouldn't. And then I look at it, and I'm like, oh my God, I totally forgot. Because what I did was I went to the area to accept it, but then I bought an item and sold a few other things, and then I forgot to accept the mission. And I was like, all right, well, Jesus, I'm just going to get out of here then. And instead of level grinding my way out, I just ran. And I ran over this this trap. I started getting killed off, because I'm running away, and they're doing hefty amounts of damage when you're not curing yourself. It starts to get brutal. And So they wipe out a couple party members. I swap a few more in, and one of the party members that comes in doesn't have float on, and they step on one of those traps in the Necro Hall, and it just fucking destroys everybody. Everybody's dead, and I'm like, oh my God. I pull out, there's one person left. It's Balthier. And I pull Balthier out, and like the second I get out of the menu, somebody just tags me, and it's just game over. Like an hour and a half of level grinding just gone. And I was like, oh my God, no. That happened to me a couple times in that game, but that one was the worst because I knew I could kill everything in the area, but I was like, I don't want to do this again. I just want to go accept the hunt and beat it. And then I died. Like, I got destroyed too. I wasn't even like halfway out. That was
sounds
rough.
horrible.
I was mad, dude.
I think I remember that Yzamat fight. I went out like 3 times or something like that, and one of those times was like there was a trap right at the end.
Yeah.
I think I only had like one guy left. It was like a miracle that I had one guy left.
Nice, yeah.
And, I had died on a trap though before. I think I died in a trap in one of the big dungeons.
Yeah, the traps are rough.
That was infuriating. The traps are rough at the beginning of the game. They aren't rough really later on.
Well, there are some.
It depends on what spot. I mean, there's a couple, that are bad.
That'll like kill you, but you know where they are normally after you hit them one time. It's the worst when an NPC hits them too. Like one of your asshole secondary party members are just like trotting along. They step on a fucking landmine, blow their legs off, kill everybody else. It's crazy. So yeah, that's got to be the worst death. I mean, the final hunt in 13 has been rocking me, and you can see my rage-filled Twitch experience, which many people have seen now. Apparently, there's like 10 or 12 views on it, which is kind of a lot for a non-review, non-episode on Twitch. So that's infuriating too, but that's a little different. That's not just a complete screw of everything I've ever had in a game like the 12 one was. So
we saved that for Saturday nights.
Yeah, that's a great question.
It is a good question. I think we're going to skip our other little things. If you want to leave us an iTunes review, we will read them as soon as we have an episode that's not 2 hours long.
Yeah.
And, of course, our questions from us to you, which I forgot to post on the forum, which I will do this week. Thank you. But we will definitely get to that. Please stay tuned next week. We're going to talk to Aniero some more. And he's awesome.
It's true. He's a really good interviewer.
Yes.
Interviewee. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's it for this time. As always, guys, enjoy the grind.
This has been another production of Ultima Final Fantasy, the Ultimate Final Fantasy Podcast. The show was produced by Joseph DeGollier and Caleb Schweiss, with music and editing by Joseph DeGollier, parodies and clips from their respective authors, of course. You can get all of our episodes as well as our Let's Plays at ultimafinalfantasy.com. You can also contact us on Twitter at UFF Podcast, as well as our contact page on our website. Be sure to subscribe and review our podcast. Your reviews may get read on the show, and look forward to the next episode of Ultima Final Fantasy, the Ultimate Final Fantasy Podcast.